Hello and welcome to the Westcity Church podcast. If you'd like to get to know us more, find us at westcitychurch.com.au. We really hope that you're encouraged by today's message.
I woke up from sleep about halfway through the morning and realised I was awake, but I was seeing something. It was a vision. One doesn't normally get visions, especially not at my age. My spiritual director reminded me that it's the young men that see visions and the old men who dream dreams. Well, you don't want to know about my dreams. They're almost always about my teaching career, in which the dreams are, I can't find the classroom, or the students are all missing, or I've forgotten what subject I'm teaching. In extreme cases, I can't even find the school. So you don't want to know about those. This vision was completely different. I was in the kingdom of God, I dare say in heaven, but I wasn't sure of that. I was sure of being in the kingdom, and it was all light, bright light around me. I could see lots of people, but they weren't shaped like people normally are. They were beings of light. I could see their faces, but not their bodies. The light was too strong. And I realised that light was all I needed. I didn't need food or drink or even air to breathe. The light was sufficient to give me life, and was giving all the others life too. I didn't see God in this vision, as I did once, but that didn't matter because God was the light. We're all in God. As I looked around the vast multitude of people, I kept on recognising some, even though they all looked the same. Don't ask me to explain that. That's how it was. And as I approached each one, there was a beautiful hug. More than an ordinary hug, it seemed to be interpenetrating between the beings as they hugged one another, as they hugged me. And it didn't matter if the other person in the hug was someone I'd had disagreements with or even opposition to in life. That was amongst the people I knew. The feeling of love and joy and contentment and forgiveness and it being all right. I guess that's called peace. Shalom. Wholeness. That was all over the place. Everything was peace and joy. And that was it. As I reflected further on the vision, I realised it was related to the communion table, because the communion table is not just a square thing in the corner with bread and wine on it. It's an infinitely spreading board, God's board, we used to call it, and it spreads everywhere. In the early days of the Reformed Church of England, they used to have, for a while, not for long, the communion table along the centre of the church, along the long way. And the idea was that it would spread right through the whole church and extend out into the world. That's how I imagine God's communion table, God's board. And there is room for absolutely everybody at the table. All these beings who meld with one another and become perfectly reconciled and loving to one another in my vision. They all have a place at the table. The table is Jesus' foretaste of the world to come. So when you come to the table this morning, imagine it as a foretaste of what it is to be like. A small foretaste, and not a very good one in some ways, although it's pretty wonderful. Imagine the table being spread everywhere and enough, always enough for everybody. God bless you.
Oh, that's nice. For anybody that's listening to this on a podcast, the whole place erupted in rapturous praise. A lot of people standing up, a lot of people crying. Sit down. Sit down. It's okay. No, it's okay. This is not the Democratic Convention, okay? I'm not Kamala Harris. Although I'd like to be. It's always a bit of a risk, of course. You want to put the first slide up? It's always a bit of a risk to ask an academic to come and speak, especially one who's like almost got a PhD in sort of an esoteric spiritual encounter kind of a thing, and one who loves Impressionist art, and who's just begun a Masters of Counselling. Now, none of that has anything to do with the message, but I was definitely going to boast. So I thought if I got it over with to begin with, that might be helpful. One of the key thoughts of this series is, I guess, what fundamental narratives, what big stories can be seen in the Bible. Some call them meta-narratives. You might have heard that word before. When I think about it, it's probably true to say that the big stories, the big ones that have spoken to me, have changed at times, actually, depending on what's happening with me and what's happening with the world around me. And that's probably as it should be. For an example, this slide evokes love and tenderness. Look, for some, that is magnificently evocative, and for others, it's just way too touchy-feely, right? Does anybody know what it actually is? It's the Trinity, yeah. It's actually a sketch of the Trinity by a guy named William Blake in the late 18th century, late 1700s. And he was a follower of Christ, but in the Romantic movement, which was a reaction against the mechanistic, rationalistic Enlightenment way of thinking. So it's contextual. So you think about what it means then, and then you think about what it means now. This is the wonder of being human, the wonder of spirituality. The wonder of the meta-narratives of the Bible is that they carry with them the ability to speak to wherever we are at different times in our lives. I'm using that as an example because you're talking this month about things like exegesis, the idea of interpreting the Bible. And the way that the book actually that's on the reading list for this series talks about that is, so this is a bit of an aside, but it might be helpful. The idea is that you look at the narrative in its original context. You think about what it was saying to those people then. You know, this actually takes thinking, right? Actual thinking. Look, I know that's antithetical to Christian thought, but it takes thinking. And then the idea is, what universal principles can be applied to the here and now? That's this idea of exegesis. So it's a bit of an aside, but there are universal principles. And they do take thinking, they do take wisdom, they do take kindness. All too often today, people take the biblical narrative and weaponize it. We're never meant to be like that. It's not about that. So there are some things that I seem to revisit in different ways and different times in my own spiritual journey, things that are big for me and my experience of being a human in a really complex and I guess mysterious world. So I want to talk a little bit about one of those big stories that I keep returning to. And I probably should also say that the big stories link with each other. And in the end, they do end up painting a masterpiece of what it is to be human. So next slide. A time to dance. It's probably best expressed in Ecclesiastes 3, this big story. And I'm just going to read 4 verses. They'll come up. Just read 4 verses together to get the picture. There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to tear down and a time to build. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. So these are very famous verses, right? And very beautiful verses. We've heard them all many, many times, I'm sure. But they're describing one of the most important big pictures of the biblical narrative. I could probably put it like this. This is what it is to be human. This is what it's like to be human. You could spend a lifetime meditating on the wisdom of those few lines. Let me read them again. There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot. A time to kill, a time to heal. A time to tear down, a time to build. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. For much of my adult life, I've wondered what to expect of my faith. God, the Bible, and at times I've gone from one extreme to the other. What about you? I've been hyper faith, no faith, anti-faith. Jesus is coming soon. He never came in the first place. He went to America to speak to Donald Trump and decided to stay. You know, I've been from one extreme to the other when it comes to this big picture of what the Bible is presenting to us. Joking aside, sometimes it is really good to take a step back and to look at the big picture. Next slide. Just read it for a sec. Think about it. Human life is cruciform. Life, death, and life again. Somebody called it a cruciform universe. A famous French priest called it a cruciform universe. So let me kind of get theological for a moment. Human life is cruciform because the universe is cruciform. Something is always dying and something is always living on. This is the way of it. This is the way of everything. Life, death, life again. This is important. There is a time for every purpose. This is what it is to be human. It's incredibly mysterious and beautiful. If you look around you in the universe, you're going to see it. Life, death, life again. You can see it in the Father, Son, and Spirit, and you can see it in your own life. What Christian theology is saying is that the universe reflects the Trinitarian nature of God. Well, logically it would if the universe was created, if the cosmos was created by that Trinitarian nature, then it would reflect that Trinitarian nature. And I think it's something that is often missed, that this is the way of living. This is how it is to live. It's life, it's death, it's life again. This is not a surprise. There is a time to mourn. There is a time to dance. There is a time for every purpose under heaven. There are seasons in life. They're not unexpected. It's how things are for you and I on this earth. Jürgen Moltmann, who died this year, one of the most amazing theological voices of the last several hundred years, calls it imminent transcendence. Don't worry, I'm not going to talk about it. But it's the idea that the presence of God has no limits. It's the idea that because the Trinitarian life of God created, gave life to, and sustains all things, the creation, the cosmos, the universe, reflects the life that was created. So regardless of who you are or what you do, all things will be included with what it means to be human. That's what Ecclesiastes is really describing. It's talking about gritty, honest human life. And there's going to be times of great light, and there's going to be times of darkness, and there's going to be everything in between. Because that's what it is to be human. Human flourishing is not about avoiding being human. Too much of religious talk is about trying to avoid being a person, trying to transcend being an actual person living on the earth. Happiness is more about recognizing that you don't walk alone. So you can jump in and dance. We get to dance. Life's awesome. Life's amazing. Life's fantastic. But it's on a spectrum. But we can't forget to dance. We can't forget to jump into life and to dance. All too often, well-intentioned, including me, Christian thinkers have tried to get out of being a person. But this is what we are. This is who we are. This is how we were created. We were created to live in a time-space universe, and that time-space universe is not ideal. But we can dance because we're not alone. We're not alone. We've never been alone. The logic of it is really simple in so many ways. If the Spirit, the first couple of words of the Bible, if you like, if the Spirit was present before time and space began and is present in all things, then he is present. And there, we just don't notice him because we're brainwashed. Yes, buy lots of things out there, but I tell you the truth, we get brainwashed in here as well. In forgetting that the Spirit is always and has always been here. Just got to look and jump in. Dance. I used to dance a lot. This isn't in my notes, and I'm not going to, but I won a disco dancing competition at Annabella's nightclub. Fairly sure I won it because the judge was keen on me. But anyhow, I won. We get to dance, but we don't get to avoid everything else. But we don't do it alone. That's the big story, that we've never walked alone. Let's put up the next slide. A bit of theology for you. No, next one back. This is Maltman. It is therefore possible to experience God in, with, and beneath each everyday experience of the world if God is in all things and if all things are in God. That's the big story. We're invited to join in the Trinitarian life of God, the reality of spirituality. We are invited to join in. Not to get all religious. Not to think, okay, how many rules do I have to follow today? Now, life has rules, by the way. And if we don't follow them, we normally screw things up. That's the way of it. But it's not actually about the rules. It's about who you're walking with. It's about who's with you. It's about never needing to be alone. But I tell you what, too much of the time in my life, I've thought, I made a mistake now, so now I'm alone again. I haven't got the right thinking about theology, so I'm alone again. I've gone too far with my thinking. I'm therefore alone again. You've never been alone. You never will be alone. You can't be alone. In fact, what the Bible says in the Psalms is that you can go down to the deepest, darkest pit. It says, I'll be there. You can go as far as the east, far to the east as you can go, as far to the west as you can go, and I will even be there in the sunset and in the dawn. I'll be there. I'll be there. It's rock solid. It's about the big narrative that there is in the Bible. You are a human being, normal, every day, living out your life. We're dust. We begin with dust, we end with dust. But we walk, living in these seasons of life, but not alone. So we can do things to minimize pain, yes. We absolutely can. We can use wisdom in our life. We can do stuff that will minimize the way life can beat us up, but we're never going to stop life beating us up. You just got to wait, by the way. I don't know how old you are this morning, but can I give you some advice? Just wait. It'll be all right. You're going to have some strife. There's going to be some really tough times. There's going to be some darkness. But the amazing thing about living this life is we will dance. Morning does turn. Dawn does break. Dancing does happen. So, next slide. So the story of the Father, the Son, and the Spirit is the story of life and death and resurrection, isn't it? It's the story of life and death and resurrection. Now, we can come up with a whole lot of fancy words about how to describe that, but what I'm suggesting is that it's a lot better. It's a lot more beautiful if you just jump into it. Just jump into it as a human being and get on with it. Take one step after the other, knowing that this is the way life is. And as we walk this life together, and as we walk this life with the Spirit, we won't be alone. And it's going to be amazing when the dance comes. In fact, I don't know about you, but I've sometimes danced in the middle of the dark. It is the story of the divine dance. Perichoresis. The idea is this. I'm finishing with this thought. Perichoresis is just Greek, you know. It's not Latin like I've got on me. Clever Latin bits. What it's saying is this. The Trinitarian life of God is like, if you like, a folk dance. Picture a dance, 3 people dancing together, and they're dancing together in such symmetry and with such connection that the dance becomes so beautiful that each one of those people are indistinguishable from each other. They're separate, but they're indistinguishable. The dance is a magnificent dance of life. It's a dance of life and death and resurrection, and you and I are invited into that dance. It's one of the clearest promises, actually. So the next slide. So it's your story too. It's my story too. So dance, what do I mean exactly by that? I mean getting up every morning and saying, Spirit of life, I'm going to jump into life today and I'm going to dance. Deceptively simple. So rather than wake up in the morning and think, okay, I've got to read my 12 chapters and I've got to go through my 4 devotions and I've got to then get the rule book out and show the things that I can't do today. You know, I'm kind of being a bit silly. But you know what I'm saying? It's not about that. It's actually about saying, Good morning, Spirit of life. That's what Jürgen Moltmann calls the Holy Spirit, by the way. He says, Spirit of life, the day's begun. I want to get into it. Walk with me. I want to dance today. And then just get up, have a shower, get moving. So we're never alone. Never, never alone. If you're going to be leading communion, could you come up, please? As Peter was saying on the video, this is the story of communion. That we're never alone. When we take the bread and the cup, I call it the bread and the cup. I'm old. That's what we used to call it back in the day, the bread and the cup. When we take these elements, these signifiers, we're actually saying, I am a part of this. I am in this. Let me read the invitation out. This is the table, not of the church, but of the Lord. It is made ready for those who love God and for those who want to love God more. So come, you who have much faith and you who have little, you who have been here often and you who come for the first time, you who have tried to follow and you who have failed, come, because it is the Lord who invites you. It is God's will that those who want Christ should meet him here. So, as we come today, as we line up and come and take, we're not alone because we're here together as a community, but we're not alone because we're not the only ones here. The Spirit who made us, who gives us life, who sustains us, is present within. So, why don't we come?
How good was that message? Thank you so much for joining us. Each week at West City, we say a benediction together. We do this because we believe that the purpose of the church is to be a caring community for the world, and that as we go and serve others, we enter into Christ's work of welcome, restoration and healing, both for us and others. We believe that in doing so, we get to see and encounter Christ. So let's say the benediction together. We come together as the church to be reminded of the go of Christ. So we will go out and feed the hungry, go out and clothe the naked, go out and fight for justice, go out and end oppression, go out and proclaim anew the old story, go out and associate with those who don't look like us, think like us, act like us, and don't even like us. And we'll do it all in the name of the one who sent us. His name is Jesus.